everyone, I hope you're all really well. Today I wanted to speak to you about skin with the help of Pete, who is a functional medicine practitioner and he also practices kinesiology, which is amazing. And I wanted to talk about the fact that obviously we have QC skincare, which is amazing, and you may have seen, but I suffer with perioral dermatitis, which is a skin condition that kind of goes around the mouth and it can go up into the eyes as well. It's a combination of kind of dermatitis, rosacea, acne. It's a nightmare. You can't cover it up. You can't. It gets really flaky and it gets horrible. Anyway. But I use chamomile and helichrysum and QC cleansing oil, and that's my super basic skincare routine. And I'm just focusing on supporting my skin to heal. However, I know that my perioral dermatitis is triggered by things going on either in my external environment or my internal environment, and I wanted Pete to help me explain that today.
Yeah, I think Alice has kind of partly given her history, and she has a very kind of, like, say, common pattern that we see for skin kind of problems, whether that be perioral dermatitis, whether it be, kind of dermatitis, psoriasis, kind of throughout the body, really. And it's about how it's driven from an immune perspective. Is obviously we kind of maybe term it more in medical terms as being more autoimmune based against the skin, but in functional terms it really isn't. It's more kind of the fact that you have an imbalance in we'll call it the skin biome. It's the kind of microflora that live on the skin and help to kind of maintain the health. It kind of sounds a bit gross.
They happily live there.
They happily live there. Yeah, they are essential. We couldn't have healthy skin without them. But sometimes these things can become a little bit imbalanced, and a lot of that is down to skincare products that people use. It's very, Alice will probably go into about the stripping, and I'll kind of hand over to you for that a little bit, actually.
Yeah, so a lot of products on the market can be really, really stripping on the skin. So we are in kind of a exfoliation pandemic at the moment. Everyone's exfoliating, and our skin is so thin and it's so sensitive that it really doesn't need exfoliating every day, as things are often telling us to. So so the skin should never feel super tight after you've cleaned it. I know that people often associate that like the squeaky clean kind of feeling, but it shouldn't feel tight. It should feel, you shouldn't really feel, it should just feel kind of happy. And really, I believe that we should only really be exfoliating once a month if we need to. The skin does exfoliate itself, and it is kind of happily doing its own thing, and we don't really need to mess with it that much.
I think one of the things I think about maybe kind of clarifying what exfoliation is, because I think a lot of people maybe think about more of the scrubs as opposed to some of the acids and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so there are the physical exfoliants, which would be like a kernel or a salt, which I would say be really careful with, because they can cause little kind of micro tears in the skin, and you often don't exfoliate in an even way. So often the cheeks get really, really heavily exfoliated, and this bit kind of doesn't. So I would always recommend using something like an enzyme exfoliator if you're going to use one. But then you also got your glycolics, which is also a form of exfoliation. Whatever you're using to take off your cleanser with, if you're using a cloth or a muslin, then that's another form of exfoliation. If you're using retinol, you're speeding up your cell turnover. So the cells that are at the surface of the skin kind of aren't ready to be at the surface yet, so they are more sensitive, which is why you are more sensitive to the sun if you're using retinol. I think that's it.
Yeah. No, and I think it's just kind of, I just wanted you to clarify, because I know like a lot of people will be like, oh, I never exfoliate, but then they're putting an acid-based product on their skin kind of every day when you kind of do the get down to the nitty gritty of it, really. And I think kind of the reason why we're, I say, kind of harping on about that and why it's so important is because it's about then the recolonization of the skin. It's like if you've stripped your skin of everything, and it's about then what microbes recolonize first, and it's often not the ones that we need. There are kind of certain even mental health conditions that have a strong link to microbes, and this kind of a topic for another day, but how they can influence our kind of mental health, our behavior, all of that sort of stuff.
But the gut-brain
connection. And if we look at things like obsessive compulsive disorders, whether it be disorder or tendencies, however we want to term it, there's a strong link to things like staphylococcus, streptococcus, wanting you to constantly wash your hands or feel like you're ultra clean, because when you do that, they're the first ones that recolonize and repopulate the skin. And now there's been a couple of research articles that have finally been recognized medically as well that associate streptococcus and staphylococcus with dermatitis skin conditions, whereas before, like I said, that wasn't kind of on their radar. It was all that it was autoimmune. And even if it is kind of, let's say someone has anti-nucleotide antibodies or something like that, or kind of other autoimmune markers that kind of they might test for in the blood, it doesn't necessarily mean that their skin condition is autoimmune. It has to have a component in it where there's something locally driving an immune response. And that, from what we see, is a couple of different fungal species, whether it be Candida or Trichophyton are the kind of most common ones.
I do think when you say fungal, people just think of, especially women, we just think of thrush.
Yeah, and thrush is kind of a type of fungus.
But as someone that has Candida, I am lucky I don't suffer with thrush. So what else can that?
I mean, the symptoms can be absolutely anything for Candida, and it's one of those things that, again, medically doesn't get the recognition it kind of needs. And I think part of the problem is because it's a commensal flora, which means it should live on us, it should live in the gut. It helps us digest carbohydrates, and without it we couldn't be healthy. But the problem is with today's society it's definitely kind of one that generally can become over dominant. It's with the use of antibiotics, obviously they kill bacteria, they don't kill fungal species, and obviously when it gets kind of decimated, then the fungus can kind of just come up from there.
We're not antibiotics, just that's something to be aware of.
No, there's a time and a place, but it's just to kind of say that when they are used, again, it's about restoring the body to where it needs to be, and often that kind of step is missed on many levels. And then it's also about kind of contraception for women as well, as that kind of drives fungal dominance over bacterial dominance quite often. So that's another kind of exposure. But I think as well, fungus is one of those ones that will definitely, given the opportunity of a suppressed immune system, will definitely kind of rise up and want to kind of take its dominance. And it's one that can, without going into too much detail, you can kind of put little roots through the intestinal lining where it just puts its spores out into the bloodstream, and it can kind of go off and colonize the rest of the body if there's anything that disrupts the integrity of the gut lining. And that is most of the foods that we're kind of told are foods today, when they're really not, when we're talking about ultra processed foods and gums and stabilizers and all of that sort of stuff. So that's how they can kind of become, let's say, imbalanced. And it's not the fact that you may potentially test positive for them on blood samples or anything like that, because as you say, they're supposed to be there. And when it's just this really slow progression in how much of a species that there is, it might be that the immune system doesn't actually recognize it as significantly being a problem until it's in the wrong area, or it's creating inflammation in the skin and driving those, we call them cytokines, which are immune chemicals to create inflammation within the skin and stuff like that. But I think one of the things that you've kind of definitely learned the last few weeks since we've been having our house done is how much of the environmental chemicals create a problem, isn't it?
Yes. So normally when my skin flares up, it's a sign that it's normally my Candida, isn't it? It's kind of active again. That's normally just through diet.
Too many pan chocolates.
Yeah, I've just gone a bit AWOL. But it has flared up again, and nothing's really changed. Like, my diet's still good. I'm on my supplements and stuff. But yeah, it's definitely flared up, and we found it's due to chemicals from the building work that we are having done. So environmentally, it does have an effect on your skin and your body as well.
Yeah, and I think kind of our little dog's a kind of real good example, isn't she, of that. Like any sort of chemicals in the environment, someone sprays perfume and she's just going mad at her skin, isn't she, kind of straight away.
Perfume's a biggie. We'll do a talk on perfume another day, but like, yeah, Mabel is the canary. What do you say? The canary
in the coal mine.
Yeah. So say someone has come to see me, we've done lovely facial, I've taught about lymphatic drainage, and we've pared back the skincare routine to be really supportive of the skin. How do we then support the body from the inside?
Yeah, I mean, I guess kind of the first thing is really to address diet. And for me, obviously, you'll kind of hear a lot about in functional medicine kind of what we call elimination diets and stuff like that, where you literally strip everything out. Obviously, if you're doing it alone, that might be one way that you need to go, because there can be many different kind of culprits for different people, and they can be completely random as well. It's kind of
lettuce was one of mine at the beginning, and it's super random.
Kind of when we're looking at looking at the different things, whether it be Ayurvedic, traditional Chinese medicine, kind of more of, let's say, a Western scientific kind of approach to it. Obviously, there's some overlap with certain things, but there's then quite a lot of disagreements over certain things as well. But for you, kind of lettuce was a very damp promoting food. Alice was damp, and but generally anyone with fungus overgrowth tends to be damp, because obviously that's an environment that it kind of deals well with. So yeah, it's kind of then finding about the different food groups that kind of really kind of create the issue for you, whether it be dairy, whether it be grains, whether it be, like we say, the traditional Chinese damp foods, whether it be things that are going to be increasing circulation like chilies and other spices and stuff like that. And not only does that tell us a little bit about what's going on systemically for you based on what foods they are, because different microbes will feed on different foods. It's one of those things that for me is, if you find it out, I'd never like to kind of hear stories where people have just cut that food out for life.
Yeah, that's really sad.
Yeah, because actually from kind of the experience that I've had with working with many people, is actually when we get to the end of the treatment, there's only really one or two foods, and they can be completely random, that people can't have, but it's about addressing.
Normally only in like massive quantities, isn't it? Yeah. Like milk. If I was to have cow's milk in something, I'd be fine. If I was to drink a pint of it,
yeah,
not
that's so good.
Yeah,
and it's the same for me with wheat. Wheat is something that doesn't work for me kind of well, but if I was to have like a couple of days a week where I had some sourdough bread and it was really good quality wheat or something, it wouldn't affect me in the slightest. If I started to have it kind of 3 times a week or something, I do notice a dip in my energy levels and stuff like that. So it is about finding kind of what doesn't work for you, but it's more important that we address what's actually underlying the problem, that immune imbalance, that gut imbalance, that that's driving potentially the hormone imbalance, malnourishing the skin, all of that sort of stuff, that we address that, so that you can kind of have a diet that's well balanced, healthy, nutritious, but not having to eliminate certain food groups for life.
Yeah. Would you say that by the time something is showing on the skin, it's been kind of brewing in the body for a long time?
Yeah, definitely. The skin's actually one of the last places to show, isn't it? And that's something you're aware of. I know you've kind of spoken about that on here before, but we kind of tend to say that the skin is on average around 4 to 6 weeks behind the rest of the body. But actually, if we kind of let's say, looking at the deterioration, I would say it's a lot longer, and often many years, really. It's kind of, let's say, an illness, and other than obviously if we get a virus or a bacterial infection or something like that. But when we're looking at just general feeling not so great, that is something that is often kind of many years in the making before we get any symptoms.
Okay. Yeah. Anything else?
No, I think it's just kind of, again, that kind of recognition. It's like, yes, you can always start with trying to find something that topically works for you, but I think it's kind of remembering that we're in that kind of, let's say, world where we all want like one pill, or we all want one thing that's going to going to do the job, and you're exceptionally lucky if you find that one thing that works for you. Unfortunately for most of us, we have to do lots of little bits of work to kind of get to the bottom of it, and it can be a journey for people as well. You know, it's kind of, to come and see me for many people is too big a step at the start, and it can just be baby steps,
but it is possible. Thank you, and I hope you found that helpful. If you have any questions, pop us over a message, and we're more than happy to help. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.